It's hard to picture you in these places. You know, they're in the red light district in Amsterdam. 400 women a night in those glass display cases.
Yeah, Amsterdam is it's such a beautiful city. I love the city, and at the same time, it's one of the hardest places for me to go to because I find that red light district so traumatizing. I think is even the word I use in the book. And the first time I'd been there, I'd already been to the red light district in Mumbai, which is the largest red light district in Asia. So in Mumbai, you have anywhere from 40 to 70,000 women in prostitution. Many of them have been trafficked, and they're actually behind bars. And so it's just this, it's a very dark scene, and it's difficult to walk through those streets.
Is that the city where they say, I don't know if you asked or someone else asked, you know, why are some behind bars and some on the street?
Yeah.
Well, when they stop running away, they can be free to
That's right.
Sell
then
themselves on
they're
the
not
street.
behind bars anymore. And I remember thinking I wasn't sure which one made me sadder, the woman that still needed the bars or the woman who'd given up hope and so wasn't behind bars anymore. And so I'd been there and experienced that. But going to Amsterdam was traumatizing in a different way because it was so glamorized. There are neon lights, there's music, there's people high-fiving, it's a party. And you know, the women are behind windows. It's like a shopping mall. It is a shopping mall. And it's just a human being. It's for sale. And they had the women organized by nationality. So if you wanted a woman from Russia, you went to this end of the street, and a woman from, you know, Nigeria, you went to that end of the street. And it just seemed so, it seemed just so messed up that I struggled to wrap my arm around my head, you know, around what you're seeing, and you're not sure where to look. You know, these were people, these were women, and I didn't want to pretend they weren't there, but you know, I didn't want to kind of do them that disrespect and pretend they weren't there, but I felt like I was disrespecting them by looking.
You didn't want to be gloating, like so many tourists.
And it's just a very sad scene, but it's such a memorable opportunity because I was there to walk the streets with actually a woman who's become a close friend, and she works for an organization. She worked for an organization called Scarlet Cord, which is located in the red light district, and they build relationships with these women. And so one of the first times I was there was walking through the streets with her and having the opportunity to actually meet them, and that changed everything.
Well, you got right to my heart when you said that we typically will look at someone who's being trafficked with a compassion that we do not give to the woman behind the glass in the red light district in Amsterdam, for example. And you tell the stories, and what percentage of them have been entrapped, enslaved, are not there because they ever chose to live this way?
You know, I think even that is a hard question, because if you get a hard number for it in Amsterdam, I don't think it's actually a true number of the story, because that's the one thing I learned. And as you said, like it does, I noticed that people will ask me if I'm telling a story about a girl, they'll say, was she there by choice or was she trafficked? And I can see if I say she was there by choice, there's like a change in us. There's something in us where we feel like, okay, that's not as much our responsibility, then she's kind of created the situation for herself. And I think even myself, when I went there, I was very intimidated by these women. I think I felt that I felt very threatened by them, that they kind of were threatening a sense of security I felt or wanted to feel, I think in life and in relationships and that kind of thing. But when I met them, it was completely different. When I heard their stories, I realized how much the same we are. Like, these are women that I'd be friends with. These are women that I would hang out with. And if the same things had happened to me that had happened to them, I would be standing on their side of the window. And it just really changed the perspective. Rather than seeing our differences, what I noticed was more what made us the same.
The positive side of this adventure is that as director of Wellspring, you are looking for problems and partnering with people on the ground who are helping to make a difference. And I think there are 10 countries that you're working in right now? 10 countries.
We've got about 23 projects in 10 countries right now that we're working with.
And some wonderful stories. I think part of the tension and your heart tug through this whole thing is you can't fix everything. Naturally, you've got a heart that wants to make it better. They're not all good outcomes.
No, and I felt like that was important, and I know that makes some chapters really difficult to read, and yet some of those stories that don't have a happy ending are actually the ones that are dear so dear to me. And I think I learned too that, first of all, that there's actually an enormous value in going through an experience of tragedy with someone too, and having that opportunity. But I think for all of us, it's so important because we want to measure success by these numbers. We want to say, 100% of women came out of prostitution and no one went back. And when you're dealing with pains that run this deep, with abuses that go that run so deep and that are so tragic, it's a long way out. And I think we really have to redefine our definition of what success is, and recognize that this is a journey, and this is a journey that you have the opportunity to walk to with someone toward healing. Sometimes you get that opportunity to see them reach that place where you see that decision, that commitment, that closure, and other times you trust that you are just part of a longer process and God has a plan for them in store.
But your faith is intact.
Yes.
Despite all the darkness here.
I think seeing seeing it, I think made my faith, I would say, more real, not easier. I think my faith is probably harder than it was before, when life was simple, before I started to see that things went wrong. But it is so much more real, and it's grueling some days, but God is so much more real to me, having seen these places of darkness than He was when I just kind of lived in the simplicity of all light.
You make some wonderful statements. You say life is about fighting through what is painful. You say your dad taught you to see texture in a world outside of yourself. You say you also made him prematurely gray.
Yeah.
Is that an overstatement? Come on.
I don't know. He'd probably be nodding his head if he was sitting here. Although he did go gray early, so I would have been, like 6. So, but I think I was already a handful by then.
There's going to be shocking things in here when you read, folks. I don't know if you saw 60 Minutes this week on gold in India. India accounts for about 32% of the global gold market, with half of the gold Indians buy spent on jewelry for the 10 million weddings held there each year. But as Naomi catalogs here, if the dowry is insufficient or not paid, bride burnings by the groom or the mother-in-law account for 25,000 deaths of young women a year.
25,000 documented cases, which of course, most of these cases go unreported, so it's difficult to get an accurate statistic. So those would be the few that actually make it into the report. It's a horrific thing. It's hard to imagine that. It's hard to imagine the things I think human beings can think of to do to each other. But I will say, in the chapter where I talk about the women who've been victims of the bride burning, their scars are so prevalent. And yet, and I say this with all sincerity, like I have never seen such beautiful smiles. Like when I saw them, that's actually what I couldn't take my eyes off, trying to piece all this together when these women had every reason in the world to be bitter and angry. And I'm not saying there's no sadness, that would be, that would be naive. But I think what shone through was their strength. And I think, and that's the impression that I was left with, just the strength and this hope that these women held on to in the face of something so brutal.
Rescue, rehabilitation, restoration, re-entry is what Wellspring International is all about. And as you're talking about these courageous women, I read in the book that, quote, "I was always a homebody, the kid who called her mother at 2 in the morning to pick her up from the slumber party. But you chose to enter a world of extreme tragedy and be an agent for making a difference."
Well, I think it's part of, my dad has a book called The Grand Weaver, and I think it's part of actually, it's part of, I think, the beauty of life, seeing this plan that God has for you and how every detail of your story, and I guess that's the one, if there was one thing I would want to leave with people who read the book, is a willingness to recognize the beauty of their own story, even those flawed places that still hurt inside, and we all have scars, and they're difficult to live with.
You talk about fairy tales, we have to add the fairy tale ending. Okay? Yeah. God can restore the fairy tale. You married Drew, whom you met in Tuscany, Italy, in June of 2010. Drew McNeil, and baby Jude is 7.5 months old.
My husband is a living testimony that long after you give up on your own dreams, God doesn't. And he's given me more than I ever imagined, and I am enormously grateful. So it's definitely a route I did not see my story going, and finally come to a place where I just kind of accepted the sadness, and then it's been more beautiful than I could have dreamed.
And this is better than a movie. You want to get your copy? It's available everywhere. The Scent of Water, Grace for every kind of broken. Naomi, come see us again.
I would love
so much
to.
we could talk
I would
about.
love to. We should hang out.
Don't go away, we'll be back.